Welcome back to the War Song of Davokar. Just like last week's section, this week we followed the story of the Queenseekers and the Raiders, two separate parties. We were, however, missing one player at the table, which means that two characters will also be missing. But not to worry, the story will continue and we will be checking in with those characters later. Let's start the recap with the Raiders. Fresh off the successful assault on Thistlehold, the Weasels awaken to see the foreboding northern wall of the city. The fires still burn and plenty of people are still behind that wall. It's clear that the city was raided, but not altogether sacked. The Weasels are a little confused about what they're doing now, but three of them, Rocco, Sook, and Scab, set out to find the Goya keeper they saved and accept their reward. Along the way, through the barbarian line on the edge of Davokar Forest, they encounter Odaiva clansmen, who recognize Rocco as a notorious highway robber. The group manages to talk their way out of any violence, but their status as pariahs is reinforced and Rocco's past crimes may come back to bite him. The trio come across Chief Helia of Godinia, who offers them aid and even an invitation to join Clan Godinia, but Scab says that the Weasels wish to remain more of an anarcho-collective. When they finally reach the Goya fortress, they are met by not just Keeper Drenna, who they saved in the chaos of the raid, but War Chief Tarhoon of Goya, who is the informal leader of the Thistlehold line. Tarhoon's plan is to wait for an Ambrian counterattack and then immediately raid the city again, but he says he can't command the other clans, so they may do as they please to disrupt the Ambrians in the meantime. Drenna offers them some food, and Rocco gets a really nice sword, and they return to Weasel Clan to find that Calvor has guided some of their clansfolk to build defenses and spar with one another to ready a defense. Mindartus, an elven former musician from Malima who guided the group's first steps in the raid, says that Weasel Clan should have no chief. She lost a leg in the fighting and can't be the leader of anything, so she advises that the group of 4 guide 50 other Weasels in preparing for the next day, dividing up tasks and taking charge of each one. The day goes well, with most tasks being a success, and Scab has a mystical encounter with Chief Helia in a steaming cave as she asks Scab to give word to Zaya that she would like to meet her. The party rests, full of food and full of pride. But in the morning, the Ambrians attack. So our Raiders, aka our B-Team party, is getting a lot done. They're meeting friendly NPCs, which I know might be bewildering to hear a lot of in quick succession, and that's why I'm using more visual aids than usual. I'm using these old Pathfinder face cards to note when I'm voicing NPCs at the table, and I'm writing a brief description on the backs of the cards to help keep my voices and roleplay more consistent. For the Weasel Leadership section, I utilized a Town Builder minigame I've already used in Symbaroum, which you can check out in this 2-minute short. It might sound like I've created a whole different game than the RPG we're playing, but really all I've done is given the environment a character sheet with similar stats and math to our characters. So let's talk about those characters. An important part of your Symbaroum character sheet is your goal. This is your character's personal motivation in the story, and for this story, I wanted to start without them and see how they emerged as we went around the table on our first session. We'll also look deeper into the builds for each character, which I have to go ahead and say are really inventive and distinct from one another despite the B-Team characters having the least experience points to work with at character creation. Rocco is probably our most fleshed out character, at least in terms of open screen time. I don't know all the secret scribings of all my players right now, and that's totally fine. When we look at Rocco's build, we see the Wanted burden, a role-playing setback that gives bonus XP in exchange for a significant drawback. Wanted adds on a backstory element. For Rocco, it means he was a notorious highway robber, given a second chance by the Huldra herself after being caught by a Wrathguard named Svanhilde who you may recognize from the Queenseekers. I don't want to force every character to have interconnectivity like that, but I'm proud of that one little piece of improv we had. Anyway, Rocco's personal goal is that he wants his name to be known and not just feared. Sook has a little less going on than Rocco, but is no less goblin core, and everyone loves her. She took the Strangler ability at Adept level and the Poisoner ability plus the Alchemist ability at Adept level, meaning she has seized the means of destruction to produce the vile concoctions she uses in battle. And this really shows off the versatility of Symbaroum as a system, because while Rocco is a formidable frontline warrior, Sook has a radically different build but is just as formidable in combat. She has the Addict Burden, which again plays off her Alchemist ability and adds a depressing edge to her manic mad scientist energy. Sook's personal goal is to find a family. Scab, the elf archer, actually has the same goal of finding a family. Despite getting some extra screen time with her own personal dungeon, Scab remains the most mysterious of the group, which ties in nicely to the elven lore within Symbaroum. Elves are long-lived, and as a summer elf, Scab has already lived at least one full human lifespan while seeing the worst of what Davokar has to offer, and yet she found some camaraderie within the Karahar coalition, which was then promptly destroyed by the Ambrians in the fallout of our last campaign. Scab probably has the most personal reason to be fighting against Ambria, and it will be interesting to see if she falls into a cool but distant Legolas role, or if she starts being the wise old mentor more like a Gandalf. Calvor's players set him apart by having him stay back and dig while the others got to know all their barbarian neighbors. Calvor has a really nice tanky build augmented with Bodyguard, making him a protector for the smaller folk around him, and the player essentially wanted to play up the pariah burden with a harsh backstory, where Calvor was essentially livestock used by a barbarian master to their own ends. Calvor's goal is to no longer be seen as a monster, which is further in contention with the bestial burden he took on by accepting the Dark Blood boon, which gave him a little extra armor. This is a perfect blend of mechanics and flavor intertwining to create the makings of a great character. We'll see where Calvor's journey leads. Now, let's check in on our A-team, the Queenseekers. Bear in mind that we are all sitting around at a table playing a game while this is happening. The Raiders got about 2 hours of game time, while the Queenseekers got a little over 30 minutes. Let's see what they did with it.
Torsten Skamos tells the Queenseekers to enjoy themselves in what could be their first and last night of so-called civilized society. His nightclub, the Scam, is full of barbarian brews, nude dancers, and sweets from around the realm. The Queenseekers are to be treated as all expense-paid VIPs for this one night as they come to terms with why they are here and what they want from their quest. Xena is the most straightforward. She enjoys all the pleasures of the nightclub in moderation, not seeking out any particular vice or chasing any particular dragon. She joined the quest because she sees it as a righteous cause, a duty to her people. On the outside, the naked tattooed warrior Xena looks like the most barbaric of the group, but internally, she is actually the clansfolk's version of a knight in shining armor. Svanhilde isn't in the mood for clubbing. She starts asking around for a fight, but the Scam's bouncers make it clear that this is not an establishment for pit fights, and they accommodate her with a fight in an alley instead. There, she faces a noble Ambrian knight, capable and honorable. But Svanhilde has a very different definition of honor, and when she narrowly bests the knight, she doesn't accept her yielding. She beheads the knight in the alley and goes to bed. Svanhilde is all about glory to the Blood Daughter, the vicious and mysterious Sarkhan goddess. Pterin is enjoying himself and has tipped a tattoo artist to add 3 more arrows to what others would think at first glance to be a solid black stripe of a tattoo. With a girl on each arm, he spies another prize on the other side of the balcony. Pterin favors the hunt, and he favors the most extreme challenges the world has to offer. His goal is to eat the sins of the world so the clansfolk will be saved. And then there's Melchizedek. Mel has never seen a naked woman. Xena doesn't count, and he is trying not to have a full-on panic attack in this club, so he sticks with sweets. As he succumbs to the symptoms of his strange condition, he is cared for by a compassionate escort. Mel's only goal on this quest is to live. Not just survive the encounter, but truly live life in a way he never has cloistered away with Clan Zarek. Cowardly, sniveling, and canonically a 40-year-old virgin, Mel might actually be the bravest in the group because he chose to walk into a death trap for the sake of being the voice of reason amidst the chaos of war.
The Queenseekers have begun to talk about which of these 7 plans proposed by Torsten Scammos they will be embarking on, and this decision will truly define their quest. While the Raiders had only 60 XP to play around with, I gave the Queenseekers 160. In D&D terms, that's basically one party being at level 2 and another being at, like level 10. These guys absolutely wreck, and it's going to be interesting to put forth suitable challenges in their path, especially when 3 of them break through the armor which so many of Symbaroum's enemies are reliant on. But going even more behind the screen, there's a bigger challenge I've set up for myself. Let's talk about yucks and yums, which I cover in another 2-minute short over here. To be even more brief, it's basically a do's and don'ts list established by the players to me at session 0. I tend to do these anonymously, but depending on your group, it could be an open discussion. A lot of groups talk about the don't side of things in their safety talks, but I think it's just as important, if not more important, to talk about what everyone does want out of their role-playing game experience. Not just for R-rated or even X-rated content, but for general elements of a game. Now, the yums presented to me by my players include sex, co-creating details of the setting, exploring characters, some big combat, so not big combat all the time, but a few boss fights, that's good to know, dark humor, camaraderie between our player characters, which actually got 2 mentions, so 2 different players. Real threat of character death also got 2 mentions. Character development got 3 mentions, and complex moral choices and gray morality got 3 mentions. This is great info for me as a game master, the director of this shared experience. While the rules and setting of Symbaroum provide a firm foundation, and the house we will build is ultimately going to be decided on by the players, these yum recommendations tell me what sort of materials I should bring to the construction site. I found it especially encouraging that multiple yums had multiple mentions, which isn't too surprising since this is a group that has been playing together for a few years at this point. They're bound to have some similar tastes. Now, let's look at the yucks. We have sexual assault with 2 mentions, repeated and exploitative violence against othered groups. We have torture, child harm, in-depth sex scenes, political intrigue, shopping, and travel. Okay, so some of those are pretty familiar as things that people don't want at the table. Sexual assault is pretty commonly the first thing thrown out at most gaming tables that use any kind of safety tools. Harm against child characters and torture against any character are also pretty sensible inclusions, and bear in mind that we're not saying these things don't exist in the world at all, just that we don't have to play it out. Particularly in this dark fantasy war campaign, torture, sexual assault, and even the deaths of children by the result of collateral damage or abject cruelty are absolutely happening in the background, but we don't have to role-play that out as a scene to be reminded of it. There's also a neat middle ground presented with regards to sex scenes. Someone wrote down sex as a yum, but 2 people wrote down sexual violence as a yuck, and someone else wrote down in-depth sex scenes as a yuck. So I can include explicitly sexual situations as long as we aren't playing them out with combat initiative rounds or, well, combining it with combat itself. Similarly, one player described not wanting repeated and exploitative violence against othered groups. Basically, this means we accept that violence might be done against, say, goblins, an explicitly pariah group in human society according to the core rules, but this player doesn't want me to have a goblin ghetto raided every session, and that's reasonable. The yucks that I find challenging are the last 3. Look, I love political intrigue. It's one of my favorite things to read about or watch in TV shows, and I love creating complex political drama at my role-playing table, especially within Symbaroum's brilliantly laid out array of competing nations and factions. So throwing all that out the window is a major setback for me personally, or at least it was at first. At this point, I am confident in my ability to shell out compelling intrigue quicker than a K-drama writer's room, but if that's all I ever do, I'm never going to learn. My games are going to get stale. Killing this darling for this one campaign isn't going to hurt me. It's going to make a better experience for the players I have at my table while making a fun creative journey for myself, and that's kind of what running a game should be about. Completely taking out shopping and travel also seems pretty major, but I can work around it. Travel seems like an integral part to a fantasy role-playing game or adventure fiction in general, but particularly with this 3-party scenario, I can see the benefit in cutting straight to the big moments and skipping all the walking in between. And yes, plenty of game masters and designers struggle with making travel interesting, and there are plenty of ways to make travel more compelling and fun rather than throwing out completely, but for this game, I'm okay with dodging that particular challenge in favor of focusing on those big moments and making them as cool as I can. And I think that's going to be enough for our recap today. This was very much a piece-setting episode, but next week is going to be action-packed as we see if the raiders of Weasel Clan can survive against Thistlehold's revenge. Until then, have a nat one day. Bye-bye.